going to be learning about the turning point battles in World War II. We'll be looking at the European theater in Europe, not in the Pacific, which is the Pacific theater. And we'll be primarily focusing on battles in Britain, Stalingrad, Normandy, and we'll be talking about Berlin's downfall. This presentation is presented to you by Ms. Hannah Yossi. All right, so before we get started, let's do a little review. Just like you folks to try to recall when did World War II begin? Go ahead and raise your hand when you think you have the answer. A little bit of the vocabulary that we're going to be looking at today is going to be some German words. To start off with, Blitzkrieg is the lightning war. Luftwaffe is the German Air Force. The Reich is it means kingdom. You'll hear it maybe used as the Third Reich or the Thousand-Year Reich. And amphibious means something that's able to go on both land and sea. And then a counterattack just means fighting back. So before we get into actual battles, let's look at how Germany was doing up until these battles in World War II. So we're looking at a map of France on the right, and just read from the slide, and then we'll talk about the map a little bit. So the Germans break through the Allies' defenses and sneak into France through the Ardennes forest. Paris is taken, and the French surrender within a few weeks of fighting. This is on June 22nd, 1940. Vichy France in the south and German-occupied France in the north are two created territories that came out of this invasion. And looking over at the map, we see the purple portion at the bottom here. This is Vichy France. Might say free zone, but it wasn't really free. It was pretty strictly controlled by Germany. And up in the northern region, in the pink, we have occupied zone. And underneath it says German military occupation. That means when something is occupied, the Germans lived there. They had officially taken over the country of France. Scandinavia is another region that was invaded by Hitler. Hitler successfully takes over Norway with another blitzkrieg. The USSR attacks Finland in eastern Scandinavia. The German Reich Kingdom, there's our first vocab word, is spread across most of Europe. And after 1942, Hitler's luck begins to turn. So just to check in, see if you guys are paying attention to the last slide, I would like you to raise your hand when you think you can locate Scandinavia on this map. All right, student one, where is Scandinavia? Good. So the nation of Sweden, Norway, and Finland has been circled. Norway, Finland, and those are the nations that make up Scandinavia. All right, so let's get into it. The actual battles, the fighting of World War II. For this slide, I would like student number one to please read, and I'll follow along with my cursor. Hitler wanted to attack Britain, but first needed to send in the Luftwaffe to destroy British defenses. German planes bombed British air and naval bases, harbors, communication centers, and war industries. The British fought back. The Luftwaffe was not able to successfully destroy the weapons, nor the morale of the British. Hitler postponed his amphibious invasion permanently. On the right you see an image that says the Battle of Britain, and it gives us the date of 1940. Those are Nazi planes flying in, and presumably British troops on the ground rushing to their planes, getting ready to fight back. All right, now we're moving from Britain in the west to Stalingrad in the east. Student 5, could you read this for us, please? Hitler had a non-aggression pact with Stalin and the Soviet Union. Hitler thought of himself as a modern Napoleon, a man who had successfully expanded his empire, yet failed when he tried to invade Russia. Hitler believed he must knock Russia out of the war so they could not go to the aid of the British. Hitler broke the pact and invaded on June 22, 1940. won. And then looking back at the map here, you'll see Poland, which at this time had successfully been invaded by Germany and the USSR. They had partitioned it, which means they divided it up amongst themselves. So Germany and Russia had a pact, had a non-aggression pact, like a peace pact. However, Hitler broke that pact when he began to invade Russia. This was known as Operation Barbarossa. It was launched June 22nd, 1941. Hitler begins to push east. So the Battle of Stalingrad, Hitler pushes east. Let's see how the fighting goes. Student 4, could you read this first, please? Hitler successfully attacked and conquered territory in western Russia between 1941 and 1942. Between November 1942 and February 1943, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack. A combination of fierce Soviet resistance and frigid winter weather caused the defeat of the German Sixth Army, who were forced to surrender when their supply lines were cut off. And referencing this image here, this is a political cartoon. We've seen a few of these before. So I'm going to ask you folks to take a moment and analyze this image. And just as a reminder, when we're analyzing a political cartoon, we want to look for symbolism, where maybe an image or a symbol is used to represent something else. And also we might note sarcasm, humor, caricatures. So just take a silent moment here, look at this image, and be thinking about who is under the Yeti and what the Yeti represents. Please raise your hand when you think you know who is squashed under the Yeti. Good, and that's Hitler, of course. You might note the swastika on his hat there, or his mustache, which Hitler wore. And then sitting on top of him is a Yeti or a snow monster of some kind. And that says, it's pretty clear here, it says on across his torso that it represents Russian winter, and it is physically crushing Hitler. Okay, this is a metaphor. The Russian winter crushed Hitler. Some statistics from the Battle of Stalingrad. Student 6, could you read us these, please? During the 5 months of fighting, nearly 2 million men, women, and children lost their lives. Stalingrad is considered the most costly battle in history with respect to loss of life. After the defeat of Stalingrad, Hitler was slowly pushed out of Russia. By 1943, it became clear that the Germans would not defeat the Soviet Union. Good, thank you so much. So I want to check in here with you folks and see what you think about what you've learned so far. So we have a multiple choice down below. The question is, which of these is the main reason Hitler failed in Russia? You could choose A, lack of discipline amongst his troops, B, his military officials betrayed him, C, Russia's harsh winters, or D, insufficient supplies for troops. So on the poll option, A, B, C, or D, go ahead and click when you think you have the right answer. All right, and for those of you who chose C, Russia's harsh winters, you are correct. All right, so moving from the battle in the east of Europe, we're going back into France, and we are looking at the invasion of Normandy. Student 8, could you read this, please? In 1943, Allied troops, including U.S. forces, needed to get soldiers on the ground in Western Europe. Since the autumn of 1943, the Allies had been planning an invasion of France from Great Britain across the English Channel. And this image is pretty great. It really shows us exactly where in northern France. This region of France over here is known as Normandy. That's why it's the invasion of Normandy. And these arrows signify where in Normandy the Allied troops were going to land. See these ships here? These are the amphibious vehicles that they could go through on the water, and then when they got on land, they could also ride on top of land. They had special wheels built on. So these amphibious landings had nicknames or code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Student 8, could you read us about how the mission went, if it was successful or not? The key to the successful invasion was misdirection. U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was in charge. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces fought their way past underwater mines, barbed wire, and horrible machine gun fire. The Allies were met with heavy German resistance, but Eisenhower had successfully tricked the Germans into thinking the invasion would come at a different time. Within 3 months, the Allies had landed 2 million men and 500,000 vehicles. They then began to push inland. All right, now on the image here you can see the troops. This is the ocean back here. These are some of the battleships, some of the amphibious vehicles you can see coming to shore. And these are the men, the 2 million men who made it. Now this is where most of the fighting took place. It was right on the beach in the sand. This is where they were met with fierce German resistance. And you can see these long-range artillery guns here that were firing into the men as they were coming on shore. So it was a very, very perilous invasion. Many people lost their lives. However, despite that, the invasion was a success. All right, and lastly, the last battle we're going to look at here is the Battle for Berlin. Berlin is the capital of Germany. Student 9, could you read, please? Once the Soviets won the Battle of Stalingrad, they continued regaining territory from the Nazis. By 1943, the Allies agreed that they would accept nothing short of unconditional surrender from the Axis powers. And once again, we have a political cartoon here on the right. You can see 2 men sitting on what looks like a book. However, instead of pages, we see teeth. And it's very hard to see, but there are some men caught in the teeth down here. You might not be able to recognize all of them, but who do you folks think this is? This man right underneath my cursor. Go ahead and raise your hand when you think you know who he might be. Good, and some students have identified this person as Hitler. He's being chomped or destroyed or killed, or however you want to see it, by these gentlemen and their unconditional surrender. And we haven't seen him in a political cartoon in a while, so just a reminder, that gentleman there is President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's the leader of the United States. And to his right, we have, puffing on a cigar, Winston Churchill, the leader of Great Britain. So by 1945, the Allies had reclaimed regions in Ukraine, the Baltics, Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. In April 1945, Soviet troops entered Berlin, which was the capital of Nazi Germany. And here on the map, you see circled capital of Berlin. And underneath is its territories that it had claimed a few years prior when the war first began. So the expansion of the territory. All of the German Reich. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops closing in, Hitler and some of his closest supporters commit suicide. Victory in Europe, or VE Day, is declared. The war is not yet won for the Americans, for victory in the Pacific has yet to be achieved. All right, folks, and last but not least, I'm going to ask you to complete an exit slip today in your breakout room. I'd like to know, after what you saw from the slides, in your opinion, what was the most significant turning point battle in World War II and why? And remember, when it's your opinion, it might not necessarily be correct, but if you can justify your response, you can still get full credit. So for whichever battle you choose is the most significant, please tell me why. Go ahead and raise your hand when you're ready for me to come into your breakout room and check.